How's everybody doing? We are here for another interview with a congressional candidate for Ohio's 7th District. That is Laura Rodriguez Carbone, and she is right here. We'll get to Laura in a minute. But first, I want to say to everybody, thank you for tuning in to this live. The questions that we're going to ask are the same questions that we've been asking all the other candidates, and we will continue to ask all the other candidates. Of course, there'll be some ad-libs in there of things I find interesting, and if you are watching live, you can feel free to type whatever you want into the chat box. And if there are interesting and good questions, I'll be happy to relay those to Laura during this time. Make sure that you check me out at theangrydem.com to get, all of these interviews as well as other political content, or The Angry Ohioan. And Laura is LauraForUs.com, so you can look at her policies while you are listening to this. You can donate to her if she inspires you. And remember, she is running for Ohio's 7th District, and that consists of half of Cuyahoga County, all of Medina County, half of Wayne County, Ashland County, and after the primary, she or someone else will be facing off against Max Miller, who is the incumbent Republican. Laura, how you doing? Thank you for coming in.
Hi, thanks for having me, and thanks for doing this. I'm doing well.
Absolutely. We'll start wherever everybody starts. Can you please tell your future constituents a little bit about yourself and your background?
Sure. So I am a public servant. I've been doing it for about 23 years. I worked primarily with the federal government across about 6 or 7 different agencies. There was a contract at some point where it's like, yeah, we're kind of in that agency, but are we really? I don't know. But I've worked primarily in public health, and I have been a civic leader on the local level here. I've served on about 20 boards and think tanks and different community organizing groups in Northeast Ohio. I am a daughter of people who farm, people who got kicked off their land because of big agriculture, and it's been going on for as long as we've been alive. My parents were born in the 40s and 50s, and they just had catastrophic losses because of the encroachment of corporate power and the consolidation of big agriculture. So they moved here looking for factory work. They did have that at a time, for a time, but in the 90s, a lot of stuff was being outsourced, and they lost those jobs, and we lost everything multiple times. We've been homeless. I've had to navigate the same systems that people are navigating today. Increasingly, those who working people, more and more people are getting caught in needing food stamps and needing Medicaid to survive. So, and in my 23 years of public service, I've seen what happens when politicians go into these offices and their main goal is to slash public programming and supports for working Americans. So it's something I'd like to reverse. I'd like to stop that. And we really do need a change. So as Matt said, if you want to learn more about me, there's my website, and I'm pretty much an open book. I'm pretty accessible. So reach out if you have a question.
Thank you very much for that. And just to let everybody know, and of course you, Laura, as well, I'm going to be looking in eyes, and I'm going to be multitasking. So I'm not paying attention to you, Laura, or not paying attention or not focusing on the conversation. I'm just doing multiple things at once.
Gotcha.
And I heard that there was a little bit of echo here, and we already did a test. We set this all up. So if there's echo, I'm really sorry about that. I'm going to try to get it in post, if anything. And if there's any kind of sound issues, then I'm going to have to figure out what to do after this, because I wasn't happy with the recording with Scott last time. But really quick, so let's go through the people's questions. Mary asked, and I think this is a very good question, is why did you decide to run at this point? And when did you get into this race? And because there's a lot of people that started really early, and there's a lot of people that came in right before the primary deadline.
Yeah, I was one of those people. I came in on the last day. So last year, and this is going back to a year, but it's a story, because I don't think anyone comes to these decisions lightly. At least I don't think you should come to a decision to run for this kind of office lightly. I was purged from my job. I was with FDA and NIH. I was doing communications. And in the current administration, if you are not willing to participate in some of the things that they're doing right now, they will purge you. There are some things going on I didn't think were right, and I was not willing to sacrifice either the people I was serving or my own integrity as a professional.
Mhm.
So I was purged out. And then I spent the year in a job market that was and still is pretty horrific. The stories you may have heard about trying to find a job right now, they're true. The market is losing, it's bleeding good paying jobs. And during that year, I watched as our democracy was being systematically dismantled. So all the agencies that you depend on, Social Security, even the IRS, these folks are being kind of like, portioned out of the whole, and then what you're left with is a skeleton crew workforce who doesn't have the wherewithal to do that work. And so I think, for me, that was a very, at least existentially, because I'm an existentialist. I'm the big questions of life. That's why I'm a public servant.
Right.
Why are we here? What should we do? So I spent a lot of last year kind of reflecting on that. For me, it was the murder of Alex Preddy.
Okay.
Alex Preddy was killed on January 24th. The filing date was February 4th. That was the straw for me. Alex was like any other nurse I'd work with, with the VA or any of the other departments I worked with. He's a public servant. He was actually trying to protect another woman
Mhm.
from being hurt. And this is something that we teach our sons and daughters to do every day in American families all over this country. And I opened up my phone that morning, and that's the first thing I saw on my social media is him getting killed.
Mhm.
It just broke my heart, but it also hardened my resolve. Running for this office was something I had, lightly considered, but considering kind of the upheaval I had gone through in my life the last year, I wasn't sure, what I should do about that. And that just, I don't feel like that we should be killing innocent people on the streets of our country. That is not the America I want to live in. But you also, I'm looking at it holistically. We have continued to send the same people to populate these offices that haven't really made the changes that our community needs. This moment is, I don't want to say unprecedented. I hate CNN for saying that word, unprecedented. It's not like anything we've ever seen. It's not business as usual. It's not politics as usual, and I don't think it should be treated lightly. And I think we need as folks that will go there with good values, but good resolve and a stiff spine, to understand what's right and what's wrong, and to actually fight for people. What I will say to Mary is one of the things I've learned from talking to folks all across this district is that they don't feel like anybody is actually fighting for them.
Mhm.
They feel like their voice is completely diminished in this current administration, in the current Congress. They don't think anyone's listening to them. Most people I talk to, I think what gives me hope in this moment is just the love I've seen in the community for other people, for our country, and just for wanting a better future for everybody. And I have spent the last 23 years getting results for everyday Americans through Medicare, Medicaid, through different public programs. And, I've been a civic leader here, and, I have never been a person who sacrifices what's right or what's wrong for anyone. And we do need more people like that. So it did, those different factors had me thinking that I want to jump into this race right now.
I appreciate that. I really appreciate that. Again, everybody, this is Laura, who is running for Ohio's 7th district. And if there is a little bit of echo here, I've been seeing some comments saying that there's echo. I'm trying to fix that right now, and I apologize in advance and even later if you do have echo. But if there is a little echo, I hope you hear clearly enough, because this is a candidate that's running for Congress, and don't judge her by my technical inabilities over here. So so I appreciate everybody. So moving on a little bit more about your background. Joe wants to know, what are the 3 policies that you are running on? What are your 3 top policies? And why? What makes you stand out, and what makes your policies stand out compared to your competitors?
Gotcha. So, 3 to 5 policies. So, what I would say is that Medicare for all right now is a non-negotiable for people
Hmm.
across party lines. I've talked to folks on both sides of the aisle that are mightily suffering because of medical bills. I know I've met a cancer patient who cannot get treatment right now.
Mm-hmm.
She cannot afford it. I think that is morally wrong for a country that is the richest country in the history of the planet, I would say. And it just makes sense for where families are. Everything else is so expensive and wages haven't moved in 17 years. And there's no way we can price gouge people to the point, past the point where they can afford it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think right now, I think the country is in a consensus about Medicare for all. I think there's a way to do it that also kind of, I mean, I think one of the biggest critiques of it, there's actually 2. There's one is like, we can't pay for it. Well, we can.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things we've learned from this administration is that we have a whole lot more money for things than we're told we do.
Mm-hmm.
We can pay for wars. We can pay for, $40 billion to Argentina for God knows what, but we need to be able to take care of the folks here. One of the other things people say is, it'll raise taxes. It actually won't. It actually would save us $500 billion a year to actually have it. And it's a popular policy. It's something that would give a lot of folks a lot of relief. The second policy, I think it's also a non-negotiable. It's a living wage. Right now at least in Cuyahoga County, to be a couple with a child, in order to, rent like a 2-bedroom apartment, the average wage you'd need to be making to actually pay for things and live with dignity is $33 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And so obviously that differs based on, what's going on in each county, but it ain't $7.25 an hour. And it's not current, Ohio's current, I think we're at 11 now. So we have to meet the community in the reality that they're actually facing. And we've got increasingly more and more people in Ohio living in cars. And the childcare costs are as much as college tuition for an in-state school.
Mm-hmm.
And that is insane to me. And I think as a country, I think we have an obligation to make sure that we are supporting people who want to have families and who look at financial decisions as either a barrier to that or as a barrier to living a dignified life. I think the last thing I'll say is I am very big on constitutional accountability. And, and what I've said to folks is that if articles of impeachment were to reach the floor, I would be a yes vote. I've talked to no one in this district who has told me that they don't want that. That's usually one of the first things they tell me. And really quickly, my family has sent someone to fight in every war this country has had since the Revolutionary War.
Oh, wow.
And so I've had family serve, I've had family die for this Constitution, for upholding the oath of office. For me, the worst thing you can do to honor the memories of those who have died for this document and for the rule of law is to subvert that law or to basically defy it.
Mm-hmm.
And, I am of the belief that there have been at least a few incidents that warrant a closer scrutiny and investigation. And, I think that everybody, no matter what party you're in, if you are committing those, lawlessness, you need to be held accountable for that. I think that's what most people in the United States want to see in any respect. And that's actually what will separate me from most other candidates. I don't think anyone's prepared to say that, but this is what people are telling me, and I have to agree with them.
you didn't mention what separates you from the other candidates.
Well, that's one of the things that will separate me.
Oh, the policies.
Oh yeah. There is and again, I am not a party sanctioned candidate. I wasn't asked to run by the party.
Right.
I'm not endorsed by them. If you ask them, they will usually skirt the question. If it's been asked in other forums that I've been in, and they said, well,
what has been asked?
How are you going to stop everything?
Oh, okay.
Because they want all this stuff. People will say, well, how are you going to stop everything that's going on with the current administration?
Right.
I would say, for me, I think impeachment, it's a lever in our Constitution, gives us the right to take a closer look at what's going on and to make those decisions as a body. And most people, everybody else wasn't willing to say it directly. I am. We are not living in a normal political environment. I could see having more of a pause and more of a thoughtful conversation regarding, the merits or detractions for impeachment if we were in, I don't know, 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, it's getting to a critical mass in this country. People can't afford things. People don't eat. People can't afford their homes. We can't afford to wait anymore. People who go into our Congress, they have to be focused on getting change for people to make life better and livable so that folks can see a day in this country where they can raise their families and they don't have to worry about whether or not they can eat that night.
Right. You're the first person to say that you support Medicare for all. Why do you think that you're the first person to say that?
Well, no,
you're the first candidate.
Oh, I am. Okay, great. Why do you think? Well, I would say I'm a progressive Dem. And
no, you're not the first person.
Oh no, I'm not. No, but I am the first person probably to say about impeachment. I am, but not Medicare for all.
Both.
Oh, am I?
Yeah.
Okay. And you asked, why do you think
Actually, no, you're not the first. Give me a shout out to Linda for asking that question about removing Trump from office.
Yeah.
She's the one that wanted to ask that question, so we jumped straight to that.
Yeah.
But both you and other candidates has said that if the articles were presented, they would vote yes to impeach after they see what the articles were. Nobody said that they would actually write the articles themselves or ask for impeachment. I didn't hear that from you either.
Right.
But you said you would vote to impeach.
I would vote to impeach.
Okay, but you wouldn't write the article to impeach.
It would depend on what happened.
Okay, but nothing has happened so far?
It has happened.
So
I'm not in Congress. I would.
Okay, so you would promote the article to impeach.
Yeah,
okay.
I would.
But you also were the first person to say that you support Medicare for all, or Medicaid or healthcare for all. Why do you think that is?
I really can't speak for other candidates. I think if I'm looking at it, from a political standpoint, I think most people, the way they run for office in this country is let's not, make anybody not like me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be at these extreme, positions or in any position that seems extreme to somebody. I am looking at the totality of what people have to deal with right now. And considering, that the data supports, over 63, I think it's the last thing I think for 63% of Americans, or even more than that, depending on the poll you look at, actually do support this. I don't think it's a radical, I don't think it's a radical belief. I also don't believe it's a slogan. I think it's been called a slogan by folks on the campaign trail. It's not. It's dignity for folks. It's a policy that has real life implications.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's the best prescription to a corporate monopoly that's gone out of control.
Mm-hmm.
The pricing is ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
And, this will allow us to negotiate prices to something that is, closer to what the procedures and what things are actually worth. And it would just bring just a lot of, a lot of relief to families and their bottom lines.
Shout out to Pam Herbert for asking about how she stands out from other candidates. I think that was very clear. Pat wants to know, what makes you a Democrat? And why are you running as a Democrat?
Sure. So as I mentioned, I've been actually elected to a party office. It's unpaid, but I've served for 3 terms on the Cuyahoga County Democratic Central Committee. And what I will say, though,
And how much is a term? Is it 4 years?
It's 4 years,
Okay.
yes. So here's what I think about Democrats right now in this country. I think the loss in 2024 should be a wake-up call that the tent needs to be bigger. We need folks in the coalition that believe in our values. They may not 100% maybe believe on everything, but we also need folks who are there that will actually challenge the leadership to get out of their own way. Right now, Democrats have been, at least recently, winning elections with a more populist message. I don't know how long that will last, but that's really what should have been done years ago. And the party was very slow to do that. And I think that only, happens if you have a bigger coalition. As for what makes me a Democrat, I define that as a person, as a voter. The party does not define that for me or anybody else. I come from a long line of Democrats. My grandparents were staunch, I would say, staunch supporters of Franklin Roosevelt. My grandfather ran gas lines in southeastern Ohio because of the WPA. I mean, they lost everything. And so they held those values the rest of their lives. And then I come from even, just a really big family of folks who hold the tenets of democracy, whether they're serving in the military. I've got cousins in Athens who have been on the planning commission. They run for office. They make sure they're civically involved. And I think as a Democrat, I think your actions do define you as a Democrat.
Gotcha. Excellent. We're sitting with Laura Rodriguez Carbone, who is running for U.S. Congress in Ohio's 7th District. You can see her at lauraforus.com if you want to follow around along with her policies or make a donation because she inspires you during this conversation. I bet she would appreciate that. Laura, we're going to move on here to other parts of this conversation. Let's go to campaign strategy because it's the next on my list, at least. Barb asks, what's your plan to beat Max? Max is, and let me frame this for everybody really quick. We are in a gerrymandered district, and it's gerrymandered. When I ran in Ohio 7th, it was a different configuration, but it was an R plus like 10.2. Because of new redistricting, it moved to around an R plus 10.5 to say 10.8. So a little bit more red. So if somebody's going to beat Max, they have to have a plan. What's your plan?
So I've actually heard it's R+5, but I don't know. It depends. I guess who's talking to me about it. Here's my plan. So Max is as you know, one-term incumbent. He was handpicked by the president.
Two terms.
Two terms?
2 terms.
Yeah. So he's an incumbent who was handpicked by the president. Has his support, has been a rubber stamp for every policy, most every policy, without really challenging maybe at any of the decisions that have raised prices or, reduced somebody's ability to qualify for healthcare, and everything else that's going on. There really isn't a lot of, community vision that they've seen from him, at least for folks I've talked to. He doesn't really have a presence in the district. He does a couple of roundtables, but his presence is very small. Max, I think he's I think he's vulnerable based on polls I've looked at, but also just what people are going through right now. I think across party lines, you see folks are stretched, they're strained in their pocketbooks, and they're tired of, letting people know that this is going on and not having them actually do it. Now, I think the way to beat Max Miller is to embody the values he doesn't seem to embody. So I am the polar opposite of who he is. I'm a public servant. I don't come from money. I actually have lived some of the struggles people are actually going through right now. I come from farms, and I don't believe he understands what's actually happening. One of the things I'll bring up is that he sits on the Agriculture Committee. They just passed a farm bill, but what he left out of that farm bill was the right to repair legislation. I don't know if people realize this. When you buy a tractor, you're spending more.
You're speaking my language right now.
Yeah. Yes.
All right. Keep preaching.
Yeah. So if you buy a tractor, it's not $500 at Home Depot.
Right.
It's $400,000
Yeah.
on some farms.
Yep.
And the fact that you can't take your tractor into a dealer of your choice and have it repaired, but you have to go to John Deere,
Yep.
who has a monopoly, who holds the, who holds the chips and holds the technology to fix your tractor,
Mhm.
and charges you about $3,500 to $10,000 in some cases a repair. That is, to me, that's holding up a monopoly, and that's not helping farmers. And so things like that matter to people, and understanding their lived experiences, but also showing the willingness to fight for people.
Mhm.
I've always been that person, and I'm a grassroots campaign person. The best thing we can do is voter-to-voter contact, door to door, and I'm building that apparatus now.
Right. Wonderful, wonderful. And just to frame this for everybody, what right to repair is a lot of people advocate is for people to be able to fix their own things. And right now, a lot of companies design products that forces them to go back to that company to get a repair. For example, Apple, for a long time, you couldn't just crack open your iPhone and get a screen off the internet and fix your screen if it's cracked, or put a new battery in. And a lot of people are advocating, saying, like, that's not right. We should be able to have secondhand or other parties, third parties people to supply these items so I can fix my own thing, because a $2,000 cell phone is a lot of money. And if it breaks, if you have to take it back to Apple, and in this case, John Deere, they can charge whatever they want for the repair, because it's either $2,000 for something new or $400, $500 for the repair. And if you don't have $2,000, which is what they're trying to get you, is to get you to get a new one, you're still giving them an astronomical amount of money for the repair. So a right to repair is saying you have the right to repair your stuff, and there should be a secondary market for the items and the equipment and the materials to repair your item. So just want to get everybody on that. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's an untenable situation for farmers. And I know there's a farm question somewhere on the list, I'm sure. But what I'll say is that in this country in general, when we make economic decisions, even foreign policy decisions, we're usually not thinking about farmers. They usually have to absorb the impact. For example, the tariffs that are currently raising everybody's prices, they've wiped out Ohio's soybean market. Because we have a multilateral economy with other, we're kind of a global economy. There's other places to get soy now. We're not the only game in town. And I think when we're making decisions like this, we have to understand how it's going to impact people on the ground. And I think that's something I bring to the table that other candidates may not. I've lived these things. I understand these things, and working in policy implementation for so long, I understand what happens to these communities when policies that are not designed to help them or to, lift them up actually hit the community.
Right.
And so, I'm happy to answer any more questions about farms, but I'm just speaking up, because most people I know that have farms, they're like, well, nobody cares about That's not true, but
and I think that people really don't understand how far the right to repair actually goes, and it actually goes into our military. That the military will get items. I mean, well, the military is a big purchaser of a lot of different items. If it's from bathrooms or some kind of supply to cooking equipment to military items as well, logistical items, all kinds of things, anything you could think in day-to-day life, the military is purchasing something like that. And if it's a technical item, the military as well has to go back to the manufacturer. And a lot of people, generals, sergeants, enlisted, will go and say it's very demoralizing to have a, say, refrigerator that's over there that, it might be a commercial refrigerator over there that, private whoever can fix, but they can't, because they have to call the person for the quote, they have to call it to evaluate, then they have to get the company's tech to come in there, and they're like, but we could fix it, and how is this even going to work on a battlefield if we can't fix our own things? And so right to repair does transcend just not only farmers, but everyday life, and a lot of people are really getting pigeonholed in by these companies. So I appreciate you bringing that up. You really sparked my interest. You must have been reading The Angry Democrat, because that's something I brought up more than once. Alex is, I'm sorry, Alex, I said Alex. Everybody, by the way, really quick, I am talking to Laura Rodriguez Carbone, who is running for U.S. Congress. If you hear an echo, please let me know, because I've been trying to fix it. So if it's echoey, please let me know. We're too far along in the conversation to start it over, so we might have to deal with it if it is, but I am going to try to still troubleshoot while we're talking. Steve Campisi, he's a union rep, and he is very active, but he wants to know, and you touched on this a little bit, so we're just going to go straight into that, is how do you plan to compete in the rural parts of this district?
So, I mean, I don't think I've said a little bit about my parents, but my parents, my dad's from Puerto Rico. They farm there. He's from a rural farming area over in Jalco, which is mountainous, and they farm coffee. My mom's from southeastern Ohio in Athens County, a little town, used to be called Jerseyville. It's called Shade. My family, we moved back and forth between here and Shade multiple times. I've lived in rural communities. I lived in North Ridgeville for about 10 years in Lorain County. So I have a good understanding of some of the impacts they're having. Some of it is very much like what we're all going through. Right now, everybody's feeling the squeeze when they try to buy something, when they look at their mortgage statement, when they look at their bank account. I think what separates rural communities from urban communities right now is honestly access to things like rural broadband. Not all of our communities are connected as they should be. If you go further down toward Amish country, that's more of an issue. And we need to make sure, and I came across this a lot working in public health in rural communities. There's, the information that you or I might have about, oh, well, we'll just look something up. Health literacy is important, and the resources for that dwindle the smaller your town gets. And so for me, I think it's a funding choice. We can do so much more to include rural communities in public life, and make sure that we are walking their values and walking their needs into Congress with us, and to fight for those. But I think I compete in those areas because I'm from those areas. So I tend to understand a little bit more of some of the challenges they have to some common issues.
Thank you for that. Let me see here. That was Steve's question, and I want to just give a shout out to Fred. He also asked a question about beating Max Miller as well. Just want to give a shout out there. Let's move over to healthcare, because we already touched on healthcare, and I want to make sure that we kind of delve into that a little bit more. Dr. Sweeney and her sister, actually, who is a registered nurse, they both wanted to know about how do you plan to maintain Medicaid coverages for Ohioans, considering that a third of Cuyahoga County is on some sort of medical assistance or some program that's from the government. And we already know that you support universal health care, but being in Congress, you are one vote of hundreds.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to write an executive order and get it through.
Right.
But what can you do to help maintain that? How can you advocate? What are some of the plans, and what are some of the things that you were seeing while you're campaigning?
So, one, I'll share, I grew up on Medicaid. I don't know where I would be if I didn't have that. Our family, at points had nothing. And if it wasn't for public programming, I don't know if I'd be sitting here with you today. It's always been an important program. And I don't agree with, attempts to cap it, to make it harder for people to qualify, to kick people off. I think it's, honestly, it's immoral. But also it answers a fundamental need that we have. I don't think anyone wants to be on Medicaid. I think they'd love to be able to have insurance that they could count on and not tied to a job. My elderly mom, she's back on Medicaid, too. And she counts on it as well. And a lot of seniors a lot of kids count on it. And increasingly these days, most people work and they still qualify for it. And so I think with Medicaid, you've got to be able to come into Congress to be able to build a coalition around corporate interests. I don't take any corporate PAC money. If I walk in there, the only special interest I will have is the community. And there are multiple caucuses, at least in the House, like the Congressional Progressive Caucus, and even the Women's Caucus, who are looking at some of these issues, and trying to form coalitions to strengthen and expand these programs. And I do think, at least in this, as we are seeing now at this time, I've known a couple people even over the past year have been kicked off the program, because under the new requirements they don't qualify.
Mm-hmm.
So I share her concern about the issue, and it's a promise from me. That's something that I would champion and try to do something about sooner rather than later.
Since you mentioned PAC money, we're just going to jump around a little bit, and I think that you covered that. You said you support. I don't know what else we can say about healthcare. Besides, I'm going to support and try to keep people on so they can get proper healthcare. But Tracy asked about, what do you think about accepting AIPAC money or any other money support from Israel? Now, I just want to just frame this as a lot of people are coming from or going for AIPAC as it being an Israel adjacent PAC, and I understand why people are saying that and asking that question, but I also want to broaden that to PAC money in general and campaign finance reform. And so, what do you think about campaign finance reform? What do you think about PAC money? And then also answer Tracy, what do you think about AIPAC and the Israel adjacent money aspect of that in politics?
So that's a great question, and I could probably talk to you for 2 hours on this, but I won't. I am a huge proponent of campaign finance reform. About the time that Citizens United came out with the Supreme Court decision in 2012, we stopped as a party talking about this. It used to be part of the Democratic Party platform. Prior to Citizens United, you still had corporate interest, infusing, tens of millions of dollars into these campaigns, and it hasn't stopped. It's just gotten worse. And now they do it with impunity, and most people won't even know who it was. That's influencing the election. It could be somebody in China, for all we know, that's giving people money. We have no way to tell. So I do not take corporate PAC money, but that also includes AIPAC money. And I actually made a video on this on my webpage, not my webpage, but my social media, kind of telling people why. I think people get confused about what it means to take that money. I think people think if you don't take it, that it means you don't think Israel has the right to defend itself. That's not what it is. I support the Jewish people. Every sovereign country has a right to defend themselves. But I do not support using, our resources for actions that we don't approve of as taxpayers. And that includes genocide. And, I think that, the American people need to have a say in some of that foreign aid, and it does have to have significant strings attached to it. It's not just for Israel, it's for every country. There are great small community PACs that could be great donors. But again, I think for my campaign, I don't want any corporation or any foreign actor. I don't care if you're from, I don't know, Bolivia or Antarctica and want to give me money, and have a corporate PAC attached to it. I'm not going to accept it. I think that the loyalties that we have should be to the people we represent. And I think we should always do right by them, and taking dollars from those PACs, it's not doing that for them.
Understood. You are the first person to say genocide when it comes to Israel Gaza. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. So, genocide as a purely, definitive term. I mean, you've got a mass killing. I mean, I think some over 60, 70,000 people have been killed, and a lot of them children. And so again, every country has to make its own decision about what they're doing. But I can still care about the Palestinian people. I can still care about their humanity. I can still, as a human being and as an American, also with taxpayer money that's in the pot there, can say, well, no, I don't want money to do that. I think there were other ways to get to the same conclusion that the country needed to get to without doing this. And so, in general, I am a lot of the way I've done public service has been humanity focused, humanity based, the dignity of human beings. And, I don't know how else to, define that as other than a genocide. It's not just collateral damage. These are human beings. Some of them, most of them, I would say, innocent and having nothing directly to do with any of the attacks that started the bombing. So that's how I would define that.
I keep forgetting to, we're on foreign policy. Everybody, we're talking to Laura, lauraforus.com. If you want to check out her campaign website, she's running for Ohio's 7th District. Continuing with foreign policy, go to Jen Brush, who wants to know more about your foreign policy ideas. You mentioned Israel, Gaza. We understand your opinion there. What about Ukraine and these last two military actions with Venezuela and Iran that is continuing to go on right now? And is there a difference between these different conflicts? For example, and I'm going to frame this as
Right.
not too specific, but kind of focus this a little bit. Russia went into Ukraine. A lot of people are saying that that's different than some of these other things. However, we say at the same time, Hamas went into Israel and attacked, and there was a defense. We went into Iran preemptively, as well as removed Maduro from Venezuela. And so I want you to try to square, do you agree with any of those military conflicts? Do you agree with the defense of some places and others? And can you explain your reasoning between if there is one, between the difference between, say, Ukraine and Israel and our actions in Iran and Venezuela?
Sure. So I think this is actually a multi-layer question. First, what I'll say
Oh, yeah,
is...
absolutely.
So first, here's the thing I'll say. Here's the thing I'll say about that. The leaders in Iran and Venezuela were horrible people. They committed atrocities against their own people. I don't think anyone's going to agree that these are great people. But the way we do things in this country matter, and we have a system and a process. And one of the things we're entitled to as taxpayers, and we'll use Iran as an example, we're entitled to an explanation of why are we, sending in more troops and putting them in danger. We've lost, I think I heard over 150 troops at this point.
In Iran?
Yeah, but it's.
I heard it was I heard not casualties, but
but it depends, and that's the other problem, is that we can't get a straight source for any information that's coming out of the region, which is, I know, to a lot of military families, very concerning because they want to know what's going on over there. I think with Iran, we haven't been given a good reason to think that they are an imminent threat to us. And I know people, keep going back to, well, Obama did this, and well, maybe he shouldn't have done that. And also, the administration hasn't been clear about whether or not this is a war. It's been called a war by the president, then it's been not called a war. And he goes back and forth. So which is it? Right now, I am looking at it based on the realities of what have been identified by this administration as what they want to do in the region. It has to be a war. With regard to nuclear capabilities, most of their weaponry is underground. In order to get to that weaponry, you can't bomb it. It's so far under there. You actually have to send troops in there. If it's for regime change, it's the same thing. You can't bomb a regime out of existence. You've got to have troops on the ground to, deal with the locals, but you also have to understand that you need a presence within the, administrative offices and wherever leadership actually is by the military in order to overthrow that actual government. And so I don't agree with the war in Iran because we haven't gotten an explanation. We don't know why we need to agree with it. We're just spending $1 billion a day. And by the way, we've spent so much there, we could have funded the ACA subsidies easily with the money we've already spent there. So, and when it comes to Venezuela, I don't know where Maduro is right now. He kind of fell off the radar after he got here. Who knows where he's at? I know I saw him in court once and then haven't heard anything since. But I also know that the regime that's now in power is the same regime. It hasn't changed. And so I think the government owes...
Maybe our oil contracts changed, though.
Well, that did change. Let me say. So, yes, to me, it kind of seems like it's driven by oil. But be that as it may, I think
it's obviously
yeah.
driven
Well,
by
yes,
oil.
okay, but be that as it may, the government owes the American people the ability to say, "I don't want that."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they're not doing that. With the Ukraine, the last thing I'll say is I support.
But actually,
Yeah.
I want you to do Ukraine, but I also want
Yes.
to kind of like just touch on that. You
Yeah.
said the American people should have the ability to say, I don't want that.
Yeah.
That would be your job.
Right.
And
But
so can you comment on Congress and what they're doing? Are they doing their job?
no, no.
Okay.
Right. What I tell people is it used to be in this country that the pride of any legislation would be bipartisan support. That's what everybody who writes legislation wanted. They want to get people on both sides to support it. They want to make sure that these things get to the president's desk and signed so it can help people.
Mhm.
That is not what's going on today. I can tell you that on the Hill, no one's talking to each other. Everybody's in separate camps. People are shutting other people out. They're not talking. They're not communicating. And right now, we've got, an administration who has a very hardline stance on what goes through Congress and what doesn't. And that's not an environment to where we can get much done as a country. So I think when people go into Congress, they have to have an eye on what's currently going on. And the levers available in that situation is pressure. If you're bringing something important to the floor, like Medicare for all, you can't let it leave the floor. You've got to be able to either reintroduce it if it's like dead in committee, or you've got to, add some amendments and get it going again. You've got to always be working to make sure those things make it to votes. Because that's really the largest accountability aspect we have now with our politicians. How do they stand on the issues? What will they put their name on? And so in absence of being able to work together as bipartisan partners, that's all we have left.
Right. So yeah, Ukraine.
I support Ukraine. We should be helping Ukraine.
So square that circle for me.
Yeah.
And again, this is I think one of the biggest questions about the Democratic Party and their support for military action. The Democratic Party is against Iran right now. A lot of people are saying like that was preemptive to prevent anything that would happen to the United States. A lot of people are talk about Israel Gaza, where it says, hey, Israel was attacked, and then they're like, well, now that's too much because what are we doing there? But now Russia attacked Ukraine, but now Democrats are like, but that one's cool, send them all the money and the bombs and everything. So where does that break down for you?
So here's where it differs for me. You have Ukraine's position in geographical relation to the rest of Europe. So Russia has long been identified as to want to take over Europe. They want more territory, they want more land. And, Ukraine at this point is sort of like the gate to that. And Putin has been, looking for some kind of, viability for his regime for years. And it's no secret to what he wants. He's pretty open about it. But there are other countries in Europe who are rightly alarmed. Him being able to him being able to get any land in Ukraine will fuel sort of the, almost, like a megalomaniacal, his lust for more land and more power. And, I think as a country, I think one of the great things we've done is we've always had we've always prided ourselves on diplomacy first. And so, in that situation, I think that because Ukraine was targeted and we look at our diplomacy with our allies in the region and we understand what's happening in that region, what the stakes are, I think that defending Ukraine becomes defending the whole of Europe. And I know that right now, most of the other European countries are helping them. They are giving them munitions. Some of them are giving them money. And so really it becomes protecting the whole of Europe versus just one country.
I I don't want to keep talking about this because I feel that if I do, I'll be being unfair because to you, because I didn't really push
That's fine.
any of this with the other people, but I'm just in that mood today. So
That's fine.
it is just what it is, what it is. But would you feel different about defending Ukraine if Ukraine was beating up on Russia like Israel beat up on Gaza?
So I think again,
So like and just be clear, like they're just jamming Moscow, and there's like.
I get, and again, the tactics have been in play in some form or another for as long as we've been alive. It's always been a conflict in some form. I think each conflict that our country takes has to be assessed from does it work for us and our allies? Will it negatively affect anybody that are allies for us? We are a part of NATO. And so, unfortunately, if it was another country targeting Russia, we'd have to support that country if it was part of NATO. And so some of the international rules apply to us, but with Ukraine, I think any Congress would really be looking at why was the attack needed? Was there some kind of pretextual issue that they were responding to? Maybe, are they, sending in, operatives to take out government officials? I mean, what's going on? And so just like the Iranian conflict and war we have now, Venezuela, I think, as much information as we can give to the American people and as much transparency that we can give without sacrificing our own security is important. But I do think that we need to take everything by a case-by-case basis, because support of an attack by Ukraine on Russia would have to be highly dependent on the circumstances.
All right. Let's move on. I'm not going to belabor that because we are almost at an hour and we want to get through all the questions. So we might go about 120 or so. Let's see how we do. Real quick, everyone. I am talking to Laura Rodriguez Carbone, who is running for Ohio's 7th Congressional District, which is half of Cuyahoga County, all of Medina County, half of Wayne County, and all of Ashland County. And after the primary and the general election, would be taking on Max Miller, who is the Republican incumbent. You can find her at lauraforus.com if you decide to donate to her or look at info policies while we are talking here. Moving on. Let's just go to something that's a little quicker here. I'm gonna go to more of like the representation and local representation and accessibility. One thing that I saw when I was around the district is that people in the world, and you're a really good person to talk about this, honestly, is that everybody campaigns pretty much where the money is or where the people are. So Cuyahoga County gets a disproportionate amount of the congressional time or your representative's time compared to, say, somewhere in Ashland County. And people in Ashland County will say like, hey, and they're like, hey, can you please come talk to us? Can you please put something here? Can you please make some time and allocate some time for us, but because we only see you when you're running for office and asking for the vote or asking for money. How will you establish local presence, and where would you establish local presence for your district? And how would you connect with your whole district?
So, and this is a great question, and I agree with the people in Ashland County. Every vote is important.
And that question was from Scott, by the way. Scott, shout out.
Yeah, hey Scott. Thanks for the question. That's a really great question too. I don't know if people realize how much money that representatives get to open offices. They get over $1 million to open offices. What we need in this county, and you bring that up rightly, we've got, rural, suburban, and then we've got more of the rural agricultural. We actually need 2 offices with good constituent services, staffed by people from those areas who understand the issues and can help folks to navigate the issues that they're having. Most of what happens in congressional offices depends on, it's constituent service based. That's a lot of what they deal with. Right now, I've talked to people that couldn't even tell you where Max's office is, if he even has one. I've heard reports there was no office Some is you have to call for an appointment. I don't know where it is. Nobody else does.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's right. I do think they need to be embedded in communities. So, for example, I know that you can get a free office if you go to the federal building, any
Mm-hmm.
federal building. But I just as I just as soon as put one in a shopping mall, like a strip mall. This is where people are going. It's
Right.
accessible. And so because I've navigated all of these, all these bureaucratic systems and helped people do it, I understand that frustration, and it's rightly placed.
Mm-hmm.
So we do need, I would say, 2 offices with a large staff of caseworkers that specialize in the things that are affecting the people in that specific area.
Well, what about you? Like, people, like, great, your staff is there, but like, what's your plan to be there?
I come back every weekend. I mean, literally the house.
But are you going to go there?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, because what a lot of congressional people do is they come back and they meet with the donors, they meet with mayors, they meet with all this stuff. But it's the mom and pop that wants to meet you to talk about their barbershop, or I just said barbershop. I don't know, whatever small business they have.
Yes. So, yeah, actually, that is also something that might kind of set me apart from folks, is that's a priority for me. It's all about priorities. Unfortunately, we do have a system where, and I think Senator Murphy wrote an article about this a long time ago. When he got in the House, he just spent 4 hours a day on the phone raising money.
Yep.
This is not something that we should be doing as a country, and it takes away from our ability to serve constituents. So if you are a representative, I believe you actually do have to work the extra mile. You have to go the extra mile, because you're not just serving voters of one party, you're serving everybody. And everybody has to have confidence in your ability to take care of them, to protect them, and to understand what they're going through, and to actually actively work on their behalf. That is your job. And so what I will say is that the standard for how we do that job also has to change.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then who holds you accountable? Because that's part of the issue is people say, like, oh, I'm going to do that. I'm going to have the office. I'm going to see you guys. And then you don't see them for 2 years, or they become the incumbent. And next, they can raise all the money because they're spending the 4 hours a day and raising the money, and they don't ever get out of office, but they also never have to see their rural or any constituents again. Like, who holds you accountable?
So you've got to hold yourself accountable, but the voters also have to.
Yeah.
And I think what also will help in that area is actually having these offices that are out there that somebody can walk in during business hours, or schedule time with their representative to talk if they're doing, open hours, which I think is great for Sunday afternoons, because it's kind of when people have downtime, and it's after, if they go to church, it's after church or whatever they're doing. But yeah, I mean, I think, as you said, a lot of people can say that, but I'm a person who works primarily in communities who need a lot of help navigating bureaucracy. That is difficult work, and it's probably more work than people understand it is.
Is the government too big and too bureaucratic?
It can be, especially in the everyday services that we are actually supposed to provide for people. It absolutely is.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Since we are on that, then let's go straight over to, and what would that be? Let's just talk civil rights and democratic institutions. Bureaucracy. We do you think you need an ID to vote, or should have an ID to vote?
So in Ohio, we already have an ID.
Mm-hmm. 13 states do not have an ID.
Yes, and I'm not really sure, but I think we in Ohio, I think we also used to accept other documents like a military ID. So if this question is about the SAVE Act.
This question is not about the SAVE Act. This question is, do you think that you need an ID to vote, or should have an ID to vote, a picture ID, government issued ID to vote?
Yes and no. I think there are other substitutes that can actually help too. I think if you serve in our armed services and you have a military ID and you're registered, and people don't realize.
Well, I mean, that's a government ID. What I'm asking is something with your current name, your current address, a picture that says, "Hey, this is the person that's here right now," so they can check to say, "I'm gonna give this person the ballot," so they can vote.
Well, I mean, yes, I do think you need something to say, "Hey, where's my ballot?" Because you have a name, you're registered, you tell them who you are, you get your ballot.
Right. So that's a yes.
Yeah, that's a
Picture
yes.
ID, government issue picture ID, yes, to vote.
Yeah.
Now, do you support the SAVE Act, and what is the difference between the SAVE Act and supporting a photo ID?
Well, again, I don't know. I mean, not just the government ID. I think your state ID should also.
That's the government. It's the Ohio government.
Well, no.
So you're separating the state government and the federal government.
No. But what I'm saying is, in the SAVE Act, you have to have a government issued ID, and it's not clear whether or not that means you have to have a real ID or if a state ID, which I guess you can currently get for free in Ohio.
Okay, so
would matter.
Okay, so this is what I'm trying to get into here.
Yeah.
I'm trying to present this as a way of see where this breaks down, because a lot of people will say I don't support the SAVE Act, but then they won't ask to say, oh, do you support an ID, or do you think that the system or a state ID? And that's what I'm trying to break down right now. So we established that. How about you break it down?
Yeah.
From top to bottom, state to ID sources to the SAVE Act, and why not? Or why not?
Okay, so
I don't know how your position is on it.
Yeah, that's fine. I do not support the SAVE Act, and I think people are confused as to what it actually is. It has nothing to do with once you get to the voting booth to get your ballot, doesn't even cover that. It covers the registration process. And what it does is it requires you to in-person register. Right now, you can register online, you can register by mail. In that scenario, you can no longer do that. And you would have to go directly to your local board of elections, which are underfunded and understaffed, by the way. And you would have to present a passport, which half of the country doesn't already have. You would have to present a birth certificate, and it's not clear to me if they want originals. Do they want a certified copy? It's not clear. There's a lot of vagaries on some of the different requirements. For people who are married like me, Carbone's not my original last name. It's my husband's name, but it doesn't match my birth certificate. So I'd have to go and re-register and probably bring, my marriage certificate and have to do everything before I could even be registered to go cast a ballot. So the SAFE Act has nothing to do with voter ID. Voter ID if you're registered, I'll just say that now, if you're registered, at least in Ohio, your registration has already been checked, meaning that they've already determined your citizenship, they've determined your eligibility to vote, and it's like that in most states. So something, I think a utility bill might help, might be fine. I know a lot of seniors don't have access. I mean, I know seniors that don't have their ID cards. I don't know how they survive without a state ID or something. But I do think that a person's right to vote, it is a right. And if the state has already gone through the process to check your eligibility, I think you should be able to just satisfy the basic knowledgeability of who you are. In the past, they've taken utility bills, they take military ID cards, they've even taken student ID. So some kind of ID is usually always required. It's just a matter of which one it is that we're requiring.
Right. Excellent. I don't know if I want to belabor that, but you said utility bills, but that's where I try to separate the distinction between a photo ID and a utility bill. A utility bill doesn't have your picture.
It doesn't, but the state of Ohio has your picture. Like if you have an ID and you leave it at home, everything's digital. They have the picture. They can check against it.
So what about just going over to biometrics instead of IDs in general?
That is a bit of a dangerous game because of what you do with that biometric information. I mean, right now we don't have any regulations on AI and its surveillance, so they're utilizing it for things we have no idea they're using it for. And so I don't think I would support biometrics for that, but I do think that the standard of whether or not you're eligible falls on the state rather than the voter. Anybody can register. The state is the one who says, no, you can't cast a ballot, and here's why.
So just to confirm, SAVE Act, no.
No.
Gotcha. Understood. What's your views on the separation of church and, I'm sorry, SAVE Act was Tracy, and also Tracy is asking about separation of church and state.
I believe in separation of church and state.
And what does that mean to you?
So for me, it means that, we can't be as a country, we have to be guided by our laws. So we have a constitution. It is, in and of itself, I guess, our version of what a sacred document might be to a religious entity. We abide by our constitution. All of our laws are, they're here based on their constitutionality. They can't be laws unless they're constitutional. And we've had fights on that, and we've gone to the Supreme Court to make, to kind of, write our course on some laws. But, I don't think that anything that is publicly, being paid for with public money, public schools, public hospitals, public colleges, I don't think that, the insertion of religion should be something that is mandatory in those cases. Obviously colleges, they teach about theology, they teach about different religions, but a person's choice to do that is still their choice. It's not something that's mandated. It's not hanging up a specific document and you have to hang it there and it has to be here. We are a nation of nations. We're also a nation of religions. We're all equal in our right to worship, but that also means that if you are, bringing a specific religion into the conversation of public institutions, you're leaving everybody else out.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe that's why the framers wanted that separation, and I think that's why we should continue that separation.
And so the separation, if somebody said, hey, I want to put the 10 Commandments in a school, that would violate the separation?
It would.
Yeah. And what if they said I would put all kinds of other people's documents in there too? It's like, hey, if we have the people there, and then we have Jewish people or some Hindi people, like they could all go in there, but we just have this too.
Again, I'm sure if they said that, they'd still be leaving somebody out.
Mm-hmm.
So,
So best just to not have anything?
Yeah,
okay.
Just, it should be pretty neutral.
Understood. This is going to be a speed one because
right.
we do have to start getting through these. We were at an hour and 10, but we still have some big questions to come through. So first, what will you do to assure constitutional rights? My biggest thing, and you touched on this multiple times, is I think that we have already transcended way down the violations of privacy, data privacy, and all these things.
Mm-hmm.
We are so far past the beyond the right search and seizures and probable cause and all this stuff that it's almost hard to dig our way back out of. That's my personal thing. I think speech is another one that is very interesting right now because of private institutions. And I personally believe, and since I'm on a tangent right now, everybody here, you get to hear my opinion, is I think that Congress has abdicated not only a lot of their power and responsibilities, because that's why they're not holding the executive branch as co-equal branch of power, as they just say, hey, we don't want to make a decision because it's politically not good for us right now. So executive branch, you do it, and if they can't do it, we'll wait the Supreme Court. But I think speech is another one where where Congress and the government in general can't violate the Constitution. So they've been advocating the power to regulate speech to companies. So speech and privacy and all these other things, they kind of say, hey, it's a private company. It's in your terms of service, so we can't mess with it. It's up to you. But of course, we're gonna be buddies with the corporations. And so I think that there's a couple rights that we have that are very much in danger right now. What do you think? What would you do to assure constitutional rights, and what rights are you looking at right now for the American people? That was a long spiel for me. I'm sorry. That's okay.
That's okay. Again, I think in order to assert constitutional rights, you have to send a representative to Congress who will fight for those rights.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the best ways to do that right now is we are seeing many violations of this. Those violations of rights do need to take a precedent because it is against a constitutional imperative. And so when we're seeing, illegal searches and seizures, illegal detainments, the suppression of free speech and protesting, and we're seeing just privacy rights just being completely blown out of the water, we need to be able to make that one. Not everybody understands what's actually going on. I think that's a great way to a great spot for congressional hearings, and also just legislation and resolutions that rein in some of these abuses.
Mm-hmm.
Without a different Congress and a different president, That's the best lever of pressure right now. You have to keep the public pressure up, and you have to force them to put their name or remove their name from things that would, you know, assert your right. And you know, I'm hoping if we can actually get enough folks in Congress to, you know, actually center these things as an imperative to deal with, I think we can actually do more to protect people than we're doing now.
Do you support what will you do to ensure the equal rights of all people?
So I support the Equality Act, which also extends rights to LGBTQ folks. And I have been, you know, working in, you know, civil rights. Most of my career, I started at the U.S. Department of Education Office of Civil Rights, and I was enforcing civil rights in schools and colleges in Ohio and Michigan. And I think that if you have a person there who has done this work, who is, as a public servant, focused on making sure that everybody is included and that people are protected, because really I look at this as a position of protection. It's not really of power. The power does not belong to me if I'm in Congress. It belongs to people. It's a position of protection. It's a position where you have leverage to make life better for your constituents, to help them through issues, but also to protect the rights that they have. That's got to be a priority for anybody in Congress.
I'm gonna change topics here really quick. And again, we are in speed mode because we need to get through a lot of these questions, and I don't want to leave any of them out. We are talking to Laura Rodriguez Carbone, who is running for Ohio's 7th Congressional District. And you can check her out at lauraforus.com. I want to talk about economic policy really quick, just touch on a couple of things that Bill and Linda, another Linda, there's lots of Lindas in this one, a lot of Lindas asking questions. They touched on congressional stock trading. We talked about campaign finance and campaign finance reform. One thing that we do have in Congress is a lot of stock trading. We're talking about millions of dollars. People like Ro Khanna, I think he had something like $53 million in stock trades and is one of the wealthiest people in Congress. Yet he is also putting out forth a Stop Stock Trading Act. I don't understand how that happens. It's so contradictory. People like Dan Crenshaw, who just lost his primary, another real prolific stock trader. Obviously, we know about the Pelosi tracker, that it tracks the Nancy Pelosi trades because they outperform this S&P 500 by, you know, a big margin. What do you think should be the issue, and how do you think you want to deal with that?
It should be banned.
Yeah.
Here's what I feel about it. I think people...
Can I add on to that really quick? Banned? Cool. Banned. But one way that everybody's getting around it, and you might be touching on this, but I just want to get it right. But a lot of people are saying, well, it's my husband, my wife, my spouse, Can you just continue?
That's actually, and what I was going to say is it's got to also extend to spouses and family.
Yeah, okay.
Because if you don't do that, then what you've got is like a slush fund. Well, here, I'm transferring $2 million from my account. You put it on this and this and this and this. Something else that's also coming up now is betting. It's Kalshi and those and those websites that allow you to bet on anything. We're seeing people making millions of dollars over insider trading on what this administration is doing. And so I think Senator Murphy has a bill that he's proposing with a couple of other folks to ban that.
Especially with war and death and those kind of occurrences. Yes. Yeah, I saw that.
You know, it does need, you know, the information that these folks get that's, you know, in some cases, in most cases classified, but it's privileged information. It should not be used for your own self-aggrandizement or to make yourself rich. I think the last thing I'll say about it, because we're in a speed round, is that people who go to Congress and the Senate make a generous salary. They make salaries that most people could just dream of right now. And so I think that position has to have some integrity, and you have to have some integrity in that position to not do these things.
Do you think and just go talk about Kalshi and Polymarket. Kalshi and Polymarket are prediction markets. Basically what they're doing is they are allowing you to bet on events. This is going to happen and I'll wager X amount of money. I actually just put online, and I got pushback, obviously, that Kalshi and Polymarket I think is one of the best places for polling. I think it's one of the best places because what you're seeing is you're crowdsourcing. A lot of people want to bet on outcomes, and just because the sheer number and the big sample size
Mhm.
and people that don't want to lose money is you're seeing that these events are starting to look like really good polling numbers of people who are putting basically their money where their mouth
Right.
is of an outcome. Do you think there's a place for poly market, or do you think that it's just all like we just got to get the speculative betting out of here?
I think we need to. It's a speculative betting by people in the know.
Hmm.
So if you've got leverage
Only
and
people in the know?
government official, I mean, even corporations. So
Okay,
let's. Yeah.
you mean like the idea of maybe a poly market could be good, but what you have is a bunch of
Yeah.
insiders as well. So there has to be a
Right.
block.
There has to be,
Right.
because,
Okay.
again, what corporations do is they know what they're going to be doing with their stocks
Mhm.
before you know.
Right.
So if you're betting on a company or betting on something, they know it before you do. And if they just get their secretary to go bet on, on something before it happens,
Right.
you can make a lot of money. There has to be some ethics that are attached to it. But obviously, our markets are fluid, but they're also inflated and they're also manipulated.
Mhm.
And so I think people need to go in with that in mind when they are making investments in other bets.
Right. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. So just to clarify, boo on insider stock trading from
Boo.
Congress.
Boo.
Okay. Big boo. Okay. No. Bad. Absolutely bad. And for family members.
Yeah.
Linda wants to know about the current tax code and what would you do to help working class people?
Well, there's actually a lot we can do. One of the things we can do is, we actually, I think it was last year, Congress actually codified, tax cuts for the wealthiest as not as something that is for a specific time forever.
Mm-hmm.
We do need to go back and rescind those. And we can. You can, as she knows, you can make changes through laws through the tax market. We have right now 2 tax codes.
Mm-hmm.
We have tax code that the wealthy people live by, and then we have the tax code that everybody else is kind of living by. We let a lot of people, a lot of very rich, wealthy people, probably the richest people, they get off of paying 0 taxes. There are ways that they qualify their income, which is no income, but I have these loans
Mm-hmm.
and I'm living off these loans, so I have no income, so you can't tax my income. We know exactly what they're doing, and we need to close those loopholes. But I also think that at least for Social Security, everybody's worried about solvency, but nobody that pays taxes into Social Security past 168.5 or 166 a year. We need to open the cap. If I make $60,000 a year and I'm paying Social Security tax on every dollar I make,
Right.
everybody should be,
Right.
no matter what they make.
Right.
So
Agreed.
And obviously those right there would help us to fund tax cuts for working and working class Americans.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What do you think about the child tax credit?
I like the child tax credit.
Okay.
And I think we probably, because of inflation, should expand it.
Okay. Excellent. Lastly, we're gonna do this. And if anybody has any questions or comments in the chat, we have about 50 people or so watching live. So I appreciate you guys being here. I hope there wasn't an echo through this whole thing, but I appreciate you tuning in. Last thing is I want to talk about AI and policy. And let me frame this: AI is the talk of the town.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's talking about it because of what it can do and what it can maybe do, right? And also everything that the periphery of the build out of the infrastructure. We're talking about data centers. We're talking about the investments. We're talking about the new companies, the new billionaires that are being made because of said companies. Mm-hmm. And we are talking about the implementations currently. Not only are you able to make funny memes, but you're also able to spoof media. You're also able to cheat on tests. You're also able to equip new smart bombs and drones with AI to try to get targets in war zones. And then what does that mean for the future? So the question is, how can and how should Congress regulate artificial intelligence to encourage innovation and economic growth? Because again, it's kind of like the plow, right? Or any of the John Deere tractors.
Yeah.
somebody out there was plowing fields by hand, and then the John Deere tractor came out, and they're like, well, there goes my job, right? But if China had, or any other economy, we're not just saying about China because, oh, boo,
Right.
China, that any economy has the John Deere tractor, now plows more fields faster, easier, grows more food. More people get fed, bigger, hunger, starvation is out. It's good. Technology good. So you have to put that in there. Economic growth while protecting workers' privacy and national security. And what is there any specific policies you would think of?
I'm very passionate about this issue because right now it's being used by corporate America to justify letting people out of good paying jobs, just taking them away. They're replacing secretaries, they're replacing, customer support agents, even truck drivers with automatic AI driven technology. And right now, under the federal laws we have, these companies don't have to answer to anybody for doing that. We do need to make sure that there is a public notice on, I'm using AI instead of people. And by the way, because I am paying for a severance, I'm paying for retraining, and placement services for these workers we are displacing. And it should not come from taxpayers. It should come from the companies. So what people, and I think you touched on this, AI ain't there yet. It makes mistakes. It is a computer just like anything else. You put into it what you get out of it. It's not a sentient being. It doesn't have a heart. It doesn't have a brain. It only has what you tell it to believe. And we still need people to oversee machines. And they cannot replace somebody's judgment call. They can't replace somebody's ability to go and reconfirm information. More often than not, AI is wrong. They're just plain wrong. Ask them for anything. They're citing it wrong. They don't even know what year it is. I mean, it's nuts, especially when you're going into using it for research. I think it could be a great tool, but I think, the onus to find any opportunity to increase your profit is negatively affecting Americans and just human beings as workers. And so we really do need to be able to save our industries and save people from not being able to find a job, which is increasingly the problem right now. We do need to regulate this industry for that.
I'm going to push back because this is what I'm here for. So, but isn't that the story of any technology? Isn't that the story? You said, oh, the secretaries, but isn't that, I mean, look, I didn't see any protests on the streets when they put in kiosks at McDonald's instead of having the workers stand at the counter. But we have that more and more. It wasn't the touch screen that had made people go, hey, where's all of this? But now it's the AI, which is causing this fervor. Do you think that, one, we've seen this in history. We've always seen technology change the way people do work. Some jobs stay, some jobs go. Is this not just another evolution of technology and jobs in the market?
I don't think so. This seems different to me. This is basically, and again, what they're really working toward is something called AGI. They're really working toward having this, like, I don't know, like Data from Star Trek. Like, he's a robot, but he has feelings and thoughts and things. That's what they want to happen with this, so that's the person, but you can control it, but it's a machine. It's a lofty goal, but I think the implications of that versus a kiosk, much greater. The kiosk, I don't think was a great decision, but even at the kiosk, it's pretty limited. You can only do orders on it. With AI, like you said, people make memes, they can make charts, they can look up information, they can write books, they can do anything they want with it right now. But I think that the implications, of this technology it can change humanity. It can change the way we look at the world and how we interact with it.
So again, the question was, how would you regulate that in Congress, and how would you do that to protect innovation while still and economic growth while protecting the things that you said?
And so what would like I said, we need to regulate we need to cap the business's ability to be able to use AI instead of people. But also, I think we need to be looking at research. We need to be looking at optimizing it for medical research,
Hmm.
and helping scientists think about cures for diseases that are currently plaguing us. I mean, I think it's a missed opportunity if we're not utilizing this technology to bring about those types of things a bit faster than we would have otherwise. And so I think it needs to be a multi-pronged approach where you are making sure that you are, not sacrificing industries to AI, and that you're allowing people to still be able to work. But I think we also have to look at what it can offer and the best places to apply it.
I wrote an article about this months ago, and it's about dignity of work. Sherrod Brown has been using that phrase for a
Yeah, a long
long
time.
time. Dignity of work. And I was at the Ford plant in Dearborn, Michigan, where they make the F-150s, and I went up there and I watched all the workers do their things. And there's this one guy there, and he was putting this like it's some kind of regulator in the back by the battery
Hmm.
of the Ford F-150s, and he would grab one out of the case there, turn around and put it right into behind the seat. Grab one, put it behind the
Hmm.
seat. Grab one and put it behind the seat. And he did that. And I stood there and watched him for a good 40 minutes, just watching him do the job. And while he was doing the job, he was on the cell phone. He had earbuds in. He was probably listening to a podcast or some music. He sent a couple texts. He made a call in between all of
Hmm.
this. And I'm wondering to myself, what is dignity of work? There was a union that negotiated that job to not be automated, because you could totally tell that job could be automated very easily, but they negotiated so that guy can have a job. Does that bring him dignity to know that that job could be automated, that a robot probably could do it better, and the only reason why he's there is because of union negotiations, and what you said is basically protectionism for these industries that could be taking over AI?
So, when, and again, maybe it might help to kind of define what dignity of work means to me.
Hmm.
For me, no matter what you're doing, and even if you're working at McDonald's and technically maybe some robot can cook a burger better, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily better, but it's just a perception.
Right.
So, dignity of work to me is making a fair wage and being able to do a honest day's work. It gives people some sense of one accomplishment, but also connection with other people.
Hmm.
And we are in an increasingly isolated society right now.
Mm.
And AI will probably contribute to that unless we're careful about how it's applied, at least in the workplace. It can
Hmm.
be a great help too. Don't get me wrong. Has great opportunities for great innovation. We have to keep working on it though.
Hmm.
Um, but I think any job anybody does is a dignified job. Even if an arm for a electric arm is stronger than a human arm, it doesn't mean that it's inherently better. I think in this country we have to have a conversation about ourselves, about what our country is, how we find value and meaning in it, and what we do to protect those tenets.
Hmm.
Right now, I think people should work less. I don't think anyone that's working right now is making a wage that is worth the work they're putting into it. And everybody's underpaid. And so I think the first thing we can do to give people dignified work is to pay them an actual fair living wage.
Hmm.
And honestly, if you do that, you'll have folks that are healthier going to work. Maybe, that person that is not in a union, the majority of Ohioans are not. It's like something like 77% not in a union. They should be.
Hmm.
You will get better workers if you allow them to have a quality of life that allows them the dignity to go to work to keep providing.
Hmm.
And so I just think that it's something that needs to be integrated into human beings and who we are, and not just looked at as I don't know, mechanical technology and equivalency quotient. So
Gotcha. In the Dune books, I don't know if you're a sci-fi person. I mentioned this to Scott the other day, that they had this thing called the Butlerian Jihad, and before the jihad, there was AI and AI infrastructure that did everything for humans, and then the humans were just like, we don't want these guys anymore, and so they destroyed all the AI, all the thinking machines they called them, and made AI illegal. And now that's in the Dune universe where you see the Paul Atreides and everything, and how everything's, even though there's a future and they can
Yeah.
space travel, they still use their hands and little wrenches and stuff like that. It's because they outlawed all these computers, so they don't have a Star Trek Data future. They have a much different future. Last question, and then last question I have of you, and then you can make some final and closing statements. I was at a meet and greet with Brian Hambly, who is running for Secretary of State. And he asked something that I thought was just, I wish more people asked this, and I never thought of it. Everything that we talk about in these interviews or in politics is always doom and gloom. The bad that's going to happen. What are we going to do? Everybody is one way or the other. It's all negative, and how do we make things positive? But one thing we never talk about enough is, what do we really like about America? What do we like about living here? What are you proud of about America right now?
Honestly, if I had to answer that question, it would be Americans.
Mm-hmm.
And here's why. I will say the current environment, most people are scared out of their mind. They're doing the best that they can to get through every day, to get through all the things they need to take care of, to get through their families. And everybody I've talked to, no matter how much money they've had, they've expressed deep concern over our democracy and care for neighbors, people they don't even know. And, a general love for the society we have in the America that they were taught that we were. I think it's a great ideal to have in your heart. And I think it's a great ideal to drive you to try to make the world a better place. So when I say that, I think most Americans are taught to do something similar to what Alex Preddy did. Mm-hmm. Help the underdog, look out for your neighbors, care about humanity, love each other. And I think if we focus on those tenets, I think we're going to be all right. But, we have a lot of systems that don't allow more people to be involved in things. There's a lot of power structures. There's a lot of gatekeeping. And the best thing we can do is to bring as many people together as possible. And if we have those values driving our policies and people who are fighting for policies, I think we will realize a better world soon.
Laura, what's the final statement? What would you like to tell your constituents?
So I think I saw a question in there on your Facebook. Somebody asked about Medina. I'm actually holding a forum in Medina on April 18th at 2 p.m. at the Medina County Public Library. So I will be going out there. I'm campaigning in all 4 counties. So I'm going everywhere on my website, lauraforus.com. I have about 8 forums coming up. So I've been traveling around and having a lot of conversations with folks. And, I want to remind people we have a primary on May 5th. We have the SAVE Act that's currently in the Senate. Some people say it's dead. It's obviously not dead. If somebody wants to put amendments on it, as the president has said, he'd like to put this, and this. So make sure that you have your documentation. Make sure you check your registration at the Ohio Secretary of State's website. Make sure you're registered. Make sure you haven't been purged. And, have any questions, please reach out to me and check out my platform. I'm a pretty open book, and I'm a pretty direct person. What you see is what you get. So,
love it. Thank you, Laura, for taking the time.
Thank you.